The war in the Labyrinth describes a conflict fought in the Webway between the Inari, an Eldari faction, and the Prodigal Sons warband of the Thousand Sons Traitor Legion, led by the notorious Chaos sorcerer Azek Ahriman. And what are the achievements of your fragile Imperium? It is a corpse rotting slowly from within, while maggots writhe in its belly. It was built with the toil of heroes and giants, and now it is inhabited by frightened weaklings, to whom the glories of those times are half-forgotten legends. I have forgotten nothing, and my wisdom has expanded far beyond mere mortal frailties. Ahriman of the Thousand Sons. Azek Ahriman, a formidable Chaos Space Marine and Chief Sorcerer of the Thousand Sons Legion, is one of the most powerful sorcerers serving Tzeentch, surpassed only by their demon primarch, Magnus the Red. Once the chief librarian and foremost captain of the Thousand Sons, Ahriman's obsession with understanding Tzeentch and the nature of chaos itself has led him down a dark, isolated path in pursuit of knowledge and power. In his ambition, Ahriman crafted the infamous Rubric of Ahriman, a monumental feat of sorcery intended to protect his legion, but ultimately leading to his exile from the Thousand Sons. This self-imposed burden to reverse the devastating effects of the rubric has driven Ahriman to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where he tirelessly searches for forbidden knowledge that might reveal the true essence of Tzeentch and offer salvation to his brethren. Throughout his relentless pursuit, Ahriman has left a trail of corruption and dread across countless worlds. Known as a scavenger of secrets, he gathers forbidden artifacts, shards of lost lore, and rare souls brimming with psychic energy. His insatiable quest has made his name infamous. To the craft world Eldari, he is a spectral thief stealing their race's wisdom. To the Inquisition's Ordo Malleus, he is a beacon that draws hordes of demons, and within the ranks of Chaos, he is both revered and feared, a figure capable of granting enlightenment or scorching those who follow him. Ahriman's talents in manipulation have allowed him to plant the seeds of chaos cults across the galaxy. Behind the scenes, he pulls the strings of influential individuals, orchestrating webs of conspiracy and intrigue. When subtlety is not enough, he wages war with spells of terror and raw psychic power, reducing entire armies to rubble and stripping the souls from the valiant. With knowledge of demons' true names and dark pacts at his command, Ahriman can summon legions of demons to his side, leaving worlds ablaze in his wake. His fury consumes billions, warping reality itself under the weight of his arcane might. Yet Ahriman does not consider himself a slave to Tzeentch or Chaos. Through the centuries he has plagued the Imperium, raiding repositories of ancient knowledge, libraries and temples. His goal is singular: to amass artifacts, forbidden tomes, and individuals who may unlock the mysteries of sorcery and reveal the ultimate truths of chaos. Establishing cults on dozens of worlds, Ahriman offers their leaders sorcerous power until they achieve his aims, whether by obtaining a rare relic or fulfilling another of his schemes. When they have served their purpose, his warband, the Prodigal Sons, unleashes their fury upon these cults, stripping them of all they've gathered and leaving Ahriman with ever more tools to fuel his obsession. In the wake of Prince Iriel's resurrection after the Battle of Ayandan, the Asuryani elders convened to discuss the galaxy's future in light of the newly formed Great Rift. Their deliberations led them to a stark realization. To prevent the Eldari's extinction, they needed to support humanity's resistance against the ruinous powers. If humanity could hold its own against chaos, the Eldari might have a chance to endure. With this resolution, the Inari, now joined by a formidable Ayandan force, journeyed into the fractured expanses of the Webway. Along the way, they clashed with Ahriman and his Rubric Marines, but eventually reached the ice moon Clysus within the Cadian system, a place of pivotal importance according to the visions of the Asuryani seers. On Clysus, they met with surviving Imperial forces, those who had fled the devastation of Cadia during Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade, and leaders including Saint Celestine, Inquisitor Katarina Greyfax, and Archmagos Belisarius Cawl. An alliance was forged, and the combined forces pressed onward through the Webway to Macragge, the seat of the Ultramar realm, with a shared mission to revive the Primarch Guilliman as humanity's guide in this dark age. In these desperate times, the Inari hastened, as the seers of Iyanden had determined that aiding humanity against chaos was a necessary path to safeguard the Eldari. Yvraine, wielding her command over death, used her influence to animate the spirits of ancient heroes from the Iyanden Infinity Circuit, breathing new awareness into wraithbone shells once passively operated by spirit stones. Now, these ghost warriors were reawakened to a state beyond dreamlike stasis. They could perceive the physical world as they had in life, with heightened clarity and purpose. Though silent, their gratitude was unmistakable in their movements. Gone was the rigidity typical of wraith constructs. Instead, these reborn warriors moved with a graceful confidence. Adorned in the armor and regalia of their mortal selves, these spectral fighters of Iyanden were ready, reborn in every sense, with their senses alive and their desire for vengeance unquenched. Alongside Iana Arianel and her spirit-seer comrades, Yvraine awakened entire ghost halls of warriors, each wraith construct imbued with purpose. The call of Inead, the god of the dead, summoned them to battle, and they felt its presence urging them onward. In mere days, the Inari were once again bound for the webway, now with a mighty force of reborn ghost warriors, as well as elements from the Bieltan Swordwind, spectral envoys from Altansar, and assault units from other craft worlds. Though many conservative voices on Iyanden protested, viewing the departure as a potentially devastating loss for their own defences, the wraith constructs were resolute and unyielding. They would not allow anyone to hinder their mission. The legacy of their people depended upon them, and their revived souls were set on ensuring their kindred remained out of reach of the devourer of Eldari souls, she who thirst. From the furthest reaches of Iyanden, the army of the reborn set out into the webway once again. The journey exacted its toll. Despite the guidance of the Harlequins from the Mask of the Midnight Sorrow, they found their progress slowed by the Labyrinth dimension's twisted nature. Strange patterns haunted their sight, vivid dreams assailed their minds, and deceptive paths appeared at every turn. The webway, a place of part reality, part warp, was not merely the domain of the Eldari. It had long been a territory marked by the influence of the dark gods and the enigmatic Old Ones who had shaped it in ages past. The corrupted expanse of the webway, forsaken by even the Harlequins, had become the hunting ground of Ahriman, the infamous arch-sorcerer of the Thousand Suns Legion. Ahriman, once a noble and righteous mystic warrior of the Imperium, had descended into darkness, driven by a relentless ambition and a vendetta born from his quest to save his legion from its curse. Once he served the demon Primarch Magnus the Red, who had unleashed a catastrophic doom upon the Space Wolves, a chapter that had nearly obliterated the Thousand Suns during the Horus Heresy over 10 millennia ago. Magnus's vengeance didn't stop at ravaging the Fenris system. He tapped into vast sorcerous forces, breaching the barrier between the warp and real space to anchor the planet of the sorcerers, his demon world, permanently in the physical realm. This metaphysical upheaval spawned a cascade of new warp storms throughout the galaxy, strengthening the Thousand Suns and re-establishing their dark prominence. Unlike any other, the Thousand Suns' pursuit of enlightenment had led them into the deepest, most perilous reaches of warp sorcery. Their gene seed, afflicted with a dark mutation, had warped many of them into grotesque chaos spawn, devoid of reason. In a desperate act to halt this degradation, Ahriman cast the Rubric, a spell that preserved his brothers, though at a terrible cost. His spell had inadvertently transformed them from mutable flesh into lifeless dust trapped within ancient power armor, locking their spirits in a purgatory between life and death. Haunted by this half-existence, Ahriman's lifelong obsession became freeing his brothers from their soulless state. Thus he turned his gaze toward the Inari. The whispers of demons soon reached Ahriman, tales of a new faction in the galaxy that defied death and wielded the power to resurrect souls. Seizing on this, he rallied his demonic minions, deploying them as his eyes and ears in the twilight realm between worlds. He sought a path to genuinely restore his legion in body and spirit, convinced this was his purpose, even though his motivations blended ambition with self-interest. As part of his schemes, Ahriman dispatched war bands of thralls to join Abaddon, the Despoiler's Black Legion, at the icy moon of Clasus in the besieged Cardia system. He believed this location held fateful importance within Tzeentch's grand design. Yet this was but a diversion from Ahriman's true obsession, a mission he saw as noble but was, in truth, a deeply personal quest for dominance and redemption. Should his spies in the webway uncover even a hint of salvation for his legion, he would pursue it without hesitation. He intended to wrest from the Inari their secrets over life and death, harnessing this power for his own ends. In their early incursions into the webway from Comera, the Inari had maintained secrecy due to their small numbers, slipping under the radar of Ahriman's minions. The webway's labyrinthine nature remained a mystery impenetrable to all save for Segurach, the Laughing God. However, now joined by Asuriani forces from Bieltan, Ulthwe, Iyanden, Altansar and other craft worlds drawn to their cause along their journey, the Inari had transformed into a force too great to remain hidden. Ahriman, who had stolen fragments of the legendary tome Labyrinthus from the Black Library and deciphered their mind-warping codes, held a keen knowledge of the webway's ruined paths that had fallen under Chaos's sway. He had mastered the ability to survey and probe these regions as he willed, poised to ambush his enemies with the patience of a predator. Thousands of years devoted to his arcane pursuits had honed Ahriman's terrifyingly patient nature. As the Inari ventured into the Psyche Delta, a maze of tunnels where the webway's walls thinned to delicate membranes, the Chaos Sorcerer performed a grand ritual of translocation, sacrificing 999 souls to honor Tzeentch. The Changer of Ways was well pleased, and in mere moments Ahriman erupted from the ether, unleashing a legion of Thousand Suns warriors and cackling demons upon the Inari. In the confined, stagnant air of the webway delta, a fierce battle erupted, a spectacle of Tzeentchian sorcery clashing with the spiritual invocations and martial prowess of the Reborn. At first, the confrontation was confined to a narrow passage, as each band of Thousand Suns and horde of demons relentlessly crashed against the Inari's defences, moving with unnatural endurance. The Eldari responded with the skill and fluidity of seasoned duelists, flowing around each charge, but the intensity and power of the Chaos Assault forced the Inari to yield ground, and the struggle expanded through the webway's narrow corridors, turning every branching capillary of the Psyche Delta into a front. Soon, countless battles raged simultaneously, with warriors locked in desperate combat above and below each other. Each side pushed to gain even a small advantage, hoping to overwhelm their enemies by striking from multiple angles. Atop a crystalline bridge, seemingly exposed to the depths of space, an Iyanden host of guardians and ghost warriors, led by the mighty Wraith Knight known as Soulseeker, charged forward. A phalanx of Thousand Suns Chaos Terminators stood as a daunting barricade across the bridge's crest. Yet the spectral Eldari soldiers advanced undeterred. Where once they had moved with solemn deliberation, the wraith-bound constructs now surged forward, bearing the grace of their living kin who followed, complex warp-powered firearms clutched to their chests. Heavy Guardian weapon platforms unleashed a continuous hail of shuriken cannon fire against the baroque armor of the Terminators. The shredding discs clanged or splintered from the warded ceramite with little effect. In response, the Scarab occult returned fire, their combi bolters sending explosions crackling over the oncoming Eldar phalanx, but this did little more than singe the construct's indomitable forms. The Thousand Suns quickly adjusted their aim, targeting the Guardians with unnerving precision, reaping a grisly toll. Sorcerers among the Rubric Marines unleashed spiraling arcs of azure energy that ensnared Wraithguard, each flicker contracting into sharp edges that cut through Wraithbone as though it were flesh, leaving only fragments of ivory remains in their wake. Those Terminators, equipped with rotary assault cannons and Hellfire missile racks, sent enough warp-infused ordnance to dismember two of the vanguard ghost warriors. The Thousand Suns' unholy firepower met the unstoppable resilience of the Wraith host, their advantage resting not in weapons, but in the power of sorcery. Looming above the vanguard, Soulseeker activated his shield generator, casting a spectral glow that shielded those on the front line, lessening the toll of Ahriman's arcane assault. The Wraithguard, shielded from the Chaos Terminator's attacks, saw their chance and advanced, unleashing their distortion cannons at close range. Raging vortexes of warp energy engulfed the armored Thousand Suns, tearing them from reality as if ripped into the void of space itself. Soulseeker pressed through the ranks of the Thousand Suns, enduring volleys of corrupting fire that would have twisted any mortal form, and swung his massive ghost blade across the line of the enemy. The blow cleaved several of the Scarab cult in half, scattering their formation. With the enemy line disrupted, Iandan's Wraithblades moved in, their ghostly axes hewing through the Prosperine armor of the Thousand Suns with an eerie precision and fluidity. The crystal bridge, battered by the intensity of clashing arcane powers, began to fracture and split along its span. Some Wraith constructs leapt swiftly from one breaking crystal shard to another, reaching the safety of the far side. Others, less fortunate, fell into the endless fractal abyss below. Nearby, the demon-choked tunnels of the Psychodelta's rightmost corridor blazed with wild warp flame. Cackling pink horrors and flamers sprayed torrents of flame, delightedly advancing upon their Eldar prey. Amongst them, towering Lords of Change hurled devastating spells that wreaked havoc on the Bieltani spearhead, which endured countless casualties in mere moments. Wherever the mutagenic flames touched an Eldar, madness followed. A squad of howling banshees was reduced to bewildered infants inside their oversized armor, gazing at their blades in wonder. A trio of swooping hawks became a cascading shower of luminous serpents. A shrine of dire avengers, unleashing a storm of shuriken, found their blades reversing course and turning upon them like ravenous predators. The horrors around the Lords of Change shrieked in glee, filling the webway with their chaotic laughter. Yet their mocking laughter abruptly ceased as figures of legend emerged, brought together once more under Jain Zar's command. Majestic as the Eldari war god, Cain, the Phoenix Lord strode forth from the webway's shadows one by one. Leading them was not a Surman, but his devoted disciple, she who had accepted Aeneid and rejoined the ranks of the Reborn. Baharath descended from above, his multi-barreled rifle blinding a Lord of Change as he shot past, his sword taking its head with a swift stroke in a flash of sapphire light. Confronted by a wave of attackers, Jain Zar spun with her polearm, forming a deadly spiral. Her Triskele sliced through pink-skinned demons on its outward path, then cleaved their blue-skinned counterparts on its return. On the ground, brimstone horrors scattered in terror as Fuegan, the burning lance, advanced, surrounded by the heat of 1,000 fiery deaths. The horrors fled, setting ablaze even the 1,000 suns that followed in their wake. A frustrated Lord of Change, Zarzap the Ineffable, stepped forward to engulf Fuegan in warp fire, but the mutagenic flames did nothing to his dragon-scaled armor. Fuegan retaliated, disintegrating the demon into mist with a focused beam from his firepike. Asurman speared a beaked herald of Tzeentch with the blade of Asur, lifting its writhing form high so that his dire avenger followers could obliterate it in a hail of shuriken. Meanwhile, Maugan Ra, standing atop a fallen Wraith Knight, coolly picked off each blade-winged screamer with his Morgatar, his unerring aim ensuring not a single shuriken missed its mark. He reserved his bioexplosive rounds for the burning chariots, trailing fire through the skies, each transformed into a blazing comet that crashed down amidst the ranks below. Suddenly, the towering greater demon Vexwing appeared behind him, staff poised for a killing blow. But before it could strike, Karandras emerged from the shadows below, dissolving into sight with lethal precision, carving the monstrous bird-like creature into ethereal fragments with his razor-sharp blade and scorpion's claw. The Phoenix Lord's mastery of battle rendered the demon host almost trivial. Not a single horror or flame-spewing creature could graze them. Amidst the chaos, these ancient exarchs were death incarnate. Meanwhile, on another front of the Inari advance, Ulthwé's warriors closed the distance with the Rubrique ranks. Having experienced the Thousand Suns' devastating fire before, the Black Guardians knew well that a single inferno bolt could obliterate an Eldar. Yet they wavered not. resolute in their faith that the god of the dead watched over them. They charged, accepting the risk of annihilation, and indeed many were lost. Without Eldrad Ulthran's presence, it would likely have been a massacre. The High Farseer invoked the runes of war to shield his kin with unnatural luck, while his trusted ally, Kisadurus the Anchorite, unleashed storms of crackling lightning into the Thousand Suns' ranks, breaking their formations. Ahriman retaliated with a blast of psychic force that parted his followers like a spectral wave, then unleashed his own sorcery. Transmuting flames lashed out, reducing Farseer Kisadurus to a rough wooden effigy, forever frozen in a pose of despair. The Mask of the Midnight Sorrow fought alongside the Ulthwians, their Shadowseer casting a veil of illusionary mist over the dire Avengers charging with them. Inferno bolts that should have struck true slipped harmlessly through, as if the Aspect Warriors were spectres in the mist. Their relentless assault won the Eldar much ground. With Harlequins somersaulting and twisting through the air, the Eldar struck the Thousand Suns line with the ferocity of a razor-sharp whirlwind. Suddenly the Rubricae found themselves overwhelmed, heirloom blades and power swords slicing with surgical precision at joints and weak points, breaking apart ancient suits of power armor. For a brief, victorious moment, the Eldar surged forward over piles of steaming, dismembered armor in the mist. But Ahriman lifted his staff, unleashing torrents of pink flame that engulfed the Harlequins vaulting toward him. 3 lithe dancers were caught mid-air, dissolving into clouds of ash as they fell. As if waking from a trance, the Rubricae responded, moving with alarming speed, slamming into the Eldar with powerful shoulder barges, punches, and the butts of their bolters, stamping down with brutal efficiency to crush bones and end lives. In a flash of warp light, Eldrad materialized amongst the Thousand Suns, his staff of Ulthamar blazing as it shattered ancient armor like glass. The battle within the tunnel spiraled into utter bedlam as the Ulthwins charged again, their black and bone armor starkly illuminated by the searing neon of the psychic conflagration around them. Here, in the anarchy of raw chaos, Tzeentch's followers flourished. Riding upon currents of etheric energy arrived the exiles, sorcerers who had gathered to Ahriman's side over millennia. 9 in total, each possessed immense power, their sorcery having once helped transform the Thousand Suns into their soulless forms. Some walked upon the air itself, each step leaving blazing imprints. Others rode on bladed discs slicing through the darkness, while some arrived on chariots ablaze with unnatural fire, drawn by swift and sinister sky-ray demons. The triumvirate of Inead had taken to the front lines, and with a psychic signal the message was clear. The Reborn, with Yvraine leading them, were tearing through the Thousand Suns' ambush. The moment had arrived to spring the trap. Ashtar Manutek, with his avian features, extended his clawed fingers, rending the air itself. 50 meters away, unseen forces shredded incubi warriors as though they were paper. Narat of the Broken Troth, a skull-adorned biomancer, stunned a group of Eldar with a blast of prismatic light before tossing knucklebones at their feet like scattered seed. Each bone grew rapidly into a skeletal warrior, rattling forward to clutch and immobilize the nearest Eldar. Ahriman conjured an invisible noose, tightening it with a flick. A score of Eldar clutched their throats, their breath stolen by his dark spellwork. Each spell extracted a steep price, but here on the edge of the warp from which they drew their eldritch might, the Thousand Suns' ancient sorcerers could bend reality with a mere gesture. Into this scene charged Yvraine, her expression a ferocious snarl. Her confident stride shifted into a determined sprint, her face alight with rage like a lioness avenging her young. At her side, Kavir, the Sword of Sorrows, hummed, its blade gleaming with psychic energy. The Vizarch, wielding his own Crone's Word, matched her pace, ready to strike, while the Incarna unleashed a furious wail that echoed with the voices of countless souls. Fueled by the energies of death, they moved at a speed no mortal could match. With whispered invocations, Yvraine snapped her fan, sending 6 razor-sharp blades hurtling toward a chanting sorcerer, impaling him in deadly unison. Another sorcerer's incantation was cut short as the Vizarch closed in, his sword of silent screams engulfing him in an eerie hush as it cleaved through his helm and skull alike. Nearby, the Incarn ascended as if on an invisible current, then plummeted down with lethal precision. Its fluid sword of souls morphed into twin daggers, slashing through the Thousand Suns with godlike strength. Rubricae warriors aimed their weapons at the Incarn, their volleys ripping chunks from its form, yet its cruel grin remained undisturbed. From its mouth spiraled a vortex of spiritual energy, freezing the Thousand Suns in place, reducing their animating energies to mere whispers of what they had been. Hatred surged hot within Yvraine, her gyrinx at her side growling in resonance. There, above them, hovered their enemy's leader, poised on a fiery disk of metal, orchestrating the chaos. Discarding her ceremonial garments, Yvraine launched herself toward him like a missile, her companions close behind. Ahriman, ever calm, set aside his staff, cupping his hands as if holding an invisible insect, and with a roar cast a handful of void energy upward. Instantly, Yvraine, the Vizarch, and the Incarn found themselves suspended in a liminal space, no longer within the webway but on the fringe, an eerie silence enveloping them as if they stood atop the crystal walls themselves. Below, battle raged in muffled tones, while behind them the void seemed to draw a deep breath. Yvraine resisted the urge to look back, feeling a presence lurking in the darkness. A voice echoed in her mind, warning that to turn would be to face the Changer of the Ways himself, and to touch the very heart of madness. But this voice was not one of her own people. It was human, the whisper of the arch-sorcerer below. Another voice, belonging to Eliarok the Sage, one of her elder spirit companions, added to the warning. She recognized this spirit well, having spent much time studying its wisdom. A sudden revelation sparked within Yvraine. "Azek Ahriman," she cried out, "I hold what you seek. I can return your brothers to life." Nearby, the Vizarch tried relentlessly to breach the webway's crystalline wall, with the sword of silent screams, his efforts unable to leave even a scratch. To her side, the Incarn hissed, streams of violet mist dissipating from its form as the ether behind them ate away at its essence. "Why should I trust your words?" Ahriman's voice reverberated in her mind, dripping with scorn. "Here in my realm your power is nothing." A crushing weight settled behind her, the searing gaze of a cosmic force bearing down with a relentless, inhuman intensity. "See for yourself," she called, silently praying to Enid that her gamble might succeed. Placing her hands on the psychocrystal walls of the webway, she focused on the rubricae, reaching deep into their essence to reverse their curse. Suddenly, a dozen of the Thousand Suns halted mid-attack, their stony forms jolting as though struck. They looked about, bewildered, clutching at their chests, shifting instinctively into the defensive stances of the ancient Legionis Astartes. "Azek, is that you, brother?" one murmured. "Where are the Athenaeans? These are Eldar before us!" exclaimed another. "What sorcery is this?" they muttered, reeling in confusion. Ahriman staggered back, his shoulders shaking, caught between laughter and despair. He brought his hands together in a fevered clasp and roared with exhilaration as he pulled Enid's chosen toward him. In a dizzying instant, Yvraine found herself hurled back into the heart of battle, the Vizarch and Incarne flanking her. "Now!" she commanded, summoning the energies of the elder spirits within. In a brilliant surge, Soul Seeker, the mighty Wraith Knight of Iyanden, materialized, trailing pale flames as his colossal ghost blade cleaved a gaping rift in the webway's superstructure. The Incarn stepped to the chasm's edge, mouth open impossibly wide, pulling with such force that the resurrected Thousand Suns staggered helplessly toward it, tumbling into the abyss below. Ahriman shrieked in defiance, streaking after his falling brothers upon a burning disk. "The Whispering God grants new life," Yvraine intoned, as the reborn surged forward, "but he also takes it." With Ahriman cast into the void and most of his forces stranded beyond an unbreachable divide, the battle in the Psychodelta swiftly tilted in the Inari's favor. They regrouped at the mouth of the Webway Delta, retreating through two adjoining spars into the sanctuary of broader tunnels. Though only half the Inari force had survived, the spirits of their fallen remained secure within spirit stones, destined to fight on as extensions of Yvraine's own host of departed warriors. The Incarn and the Phoenix Lords had vanished, leaving behind only the spectral remnants of the demons they had vanquished. Once more, the Harlequins of the Midnight Sorrow took up their role as guides, following the beacon of Segurak's laughter like a ship navigating by a distant light. Amused by Ivrain's bold strategy, the laughing god lent his aid, pleased to bend fate against the dark gods as he had always done. With the ancient Eldar pantheon long devoured by she who thirsts, Segurak sought a worthy companion in his rebellion. Awakened yet somber, Inead offered a somber contrast to the trickster's vibrant spirit, but any entity that could defy Slaanesh was an ally worth having. The Inari, inspired, began to honor this nascent pantheon, transforming thought, deed and attire into a microcosmic echo of their ancestors' faith. One spirit seer jested that if a trio were to arise among the living, then perhaps Iana Arianal would be the maiden, Ivrain the mother, and Lilith Hesperax the crone, though a sharp glare from a crucible blood bride silenced her. Under the laughing god's watchful guidance, the Inari advanced quickly toward the desolate moon of Clasus. This ghostly orb, orbiting Casa Holn in the Cadia system, was pale and frigid, its surface swathed in raging snowstorms. Eldrad Ulthran, who had foreseen the moon's rise in his divinations, harboured a growing dread, for in his visions he saw its pure white plains marred by rivers of spilled blood. For the Eldar, such an omen was a dreaded harbinger, recalling the blood of Eldanesh spilled by Cain, the war god, and signalling a rift between their kind and their gods. Yet, the High Farseer held on to a hope that this omen might be twisted in their favour, a prophecy of doom, not for the reborn Eldari, but for their foes. They stood at a pivotal juncture where joining forces with humanity could land a critical blow against the dark gods, possibly preventing the cosmos itself from coming undone. But Eldrad and the Inari remained unaware of the omen's cruel accuracy for any soul who dared tread upon Clasus's cursed surface. Already, Abaddon, the Despoiler's Black Legion, surged across the frozen landscape, waging merciless war upon the Imperial forces, rallying behind visions of the living saint, Celestine. Gathered before the spherical webway portal that would take them to the Crone's Claw Mountains, the Inari held a final communion in Inead's name. A contingent of Bealtan aspect warriors were the first to wholly offer their souls to the Whispering God, inspired to honor not just Cain, but also Inead, setting aside their helms and warrior personas in an act of total faith. In pledging themselves to Inead, they committed to an afterlife free of Slaanesh's clutches. If they fell in battle, their spirits would find refuge within their reborn kin, joining Inead's realm and forever waging war against chaos. Amassing for the fray alongside Eldrad and the Black Guardians of Ulthwé was a force from the witch cult of strife. Hearing of Ivrain's goal through Harlequin contacts, Lilith Hesperax had dispatched her own lethal agents from the arenas of Comora to join the Inari. If these fighters reported that Ivrain could indeed counter the soul curse plaguing the Drukhari, Lilith herself would seek out Inead's cause. Ivrain knew Lilith's intentions were likely selfish. The infamous Arena Queen would prize nothing more than eternal adoration without the eternal toll of souls. But Ivrain, her forces reduced by Ahriman's ambush, welcomed these Comorite kin gratefully. Approaching the webway gate, Ivrain ignited lines of psychic flame around the tiny trigger sphere suspended before it, setting the portal's mechanisms in motion. A wisp of frigid air grew to a piercing gale as the webway gate dismantled the barrier between the Labyrinth dimension and the frost-bound peak of the Crone's Claw in real space. The Inari leapt into the swirling portal, only to emerge into a nightmare scene. The site was a steep hollow, nearly hemispherical, its edges jagged with rocks and rimmed by a brutal wasteland drenched in blood. Corpses stretched in a trail that wound several kilometers into the hazy distance, while the wounded and dying crawled through blood-soaked snow, seeking any hope of escape. These were the Imperials Eldrad had foreseen, their strength crushed by the relentless fury of chaos. Exhausted from forced marches through frozen wilderness, they had been ruthlessly hounded by the Black Legion, driven toward the same webway gate from which the Inari had just emerged. Here, in this desolate hollow, the Imperials had chosen to make a final stand, unaware of how close they had come to the ancient Xenos gate. The Imperials, whether too stubborn or simply oblivious to the hopeless odds, fought on with a savage determination. A disparate array of Black Templars, Space Marines, Sisters of Battle, Imperial Guardsmen, and Adeptus Mechanicus forces stood at the feet of battered Imperial Knights, each warrior laying down their life to shield three figures at their core: Inquisitor Caterina Greyfax of the Ordo Hereticus, the Mechanicus Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Caul, and the living saint herself, Celestine of the Order of the Martyred Lady. This scene was taken in instantly by the Inari. For the sharp-eyed Eldar, even a raging blizzard could scarcely obscure their sight. The swift windriders of the Black Guardians launched the initial charge, with the deadly witches of the Cult of Strife close behind them. The Imperials, stretched to their breaking point, could only look on in stunned disbelief as the Inari forces surged around them, crashing into the Black Legion. The Chaos Space Marines, who had pursued their prey relentlessly across the frozen plains of Clysus, were thwarted at the final hour. Now it was the blood of the Black Legion that soaked the snows crimson, and the ground lay thick with the smouldering remains of traitors. The sudden appearance of such a powerful Eldar force stayed even Abaddon's hand momentarily. Still he pressed his attack, but was forced to retreat twice, his forces dwindling with each attempt to breach the ridge at the Crone's Claw. After his third failed attempt, he bitterly commanded a tactical withdrawal. At last, the exhausted Imperial forces had reached a tenuous refuge. In the relative security of the Crone's Claw, the natural basin that concealed the Clysus Wraithgate, surviving humans and Eldar regarded each other with suspicion. The bedraggled Imperial troops, numbering barely 100, clung to life, rallying around the massive Triaros conveyor that the Archmagos guarded as though it were more precious than life itself. Amazingly, every warrior's eyes still burned with the fires of battle and the certainty of unwavering faith. Recognizing the horrors the Black Legion would have wrought upon these beleaguered humans, the Inari looked upon their resilience with unexpected respect. To have withstood Abaddon the Despoiler in person, and to remain defiant, such a feat was worthy of the Dark Muses. Even the notoriously ruthless witches of the Cult of Strife found themselves moved by a grudging admiration. As the elder host parted, a clear path was made toward the living Saint Celestine. On her left stood Inquisitor Greyfax, her eyes as wary of Celestine as they were of the Xenos. On her right was the Archmagos of Mars, his servo eyes following the movements of the elusive Shadowseer Silandri Veilwalker as she slipped unnoticed into the Eldar ranks, disappearing from view. First came Millennial, the Autarch of Bieltan, then Ivrain, the Vizarch, and Eldrad. Cloaked in eldritch energies, the elder leaders seemed as ancient monarchs come forth from the mists of legend. As they approached, Inquisitor Greyfax's hand instinctively fell to her power sword, and in unison, the Vizarch's hand tightened on the hilt of his Cronesword Asuvar. These subtle displays of readiness echoed among both factions, swelling the tension to a fever pitch. It seemed that a clash between these uneasy allies was inevitable. But in a voice that cut through the rising tension, Autarch Millennial spoke, halting the escalation. His words brought a fleeting calm, buying a few critical moments. In those seconds, he made a choice. He bowed low before the living saint, his mastery of both low Gothic and human etiquette flawless. Celestine stepped forward to meet him, deliberately wiping her silvered blade of blood before sheathing it, motioning for her Gemini superior to remain behind alongside Archmagos Caul and his precious conveyor. The few remaining Astra Militarum survivors refrained from lowering their weapons, but maintained a tense readiness. As Inquisitor Greyfax approached to join the tense exchange, the Black Templars stood rigid, glancing at one another with barely restrained resolve, each seeming to dare the other to take the first strike. Archmagos Caul's Binharic command clicked through the lingua technis, prompting the Skitarii sharpshooters positioned in the valley's mouth to focus their long-barreled rifles on the confident Autarch advancing towards St. Celestine. Autarch Millennial took the first step forward. The Elder Seers had gained the humans' reputation as manipulators, and the Drukhari, the feared Dark Eldar, were seen as malice incarnate. But a warrior might yet earn the respect of humanity. "I know you harbour hatred for our kind," Millennial of Bieltan, addressed the human leaders. "And you are not without reason. But as each of your countless worlds holds its own unique ways, so do we, scattered as we are. What you see now is a force that seeks survival, for both your people and ours." "We see only preening cowards and depraved monsters," spat Greyfax. Celestine cast her an admonishing look, but the words lingered heavily in the air. Millennial's gaze flickered to the allies of Inead at his side before meeting Greyfax's steely glare. "At first I thought much the same. We too have reason to fear the unknown, but these are visionaries, agents of change and of hope." "Your saint and I share the same aim," Yvraine interjected, her voice calm and unwavering, even if she may not yet fully grasp what that entails. "We are here to see your journey completed," Millennial added. Greyfax's eyes narrowed. "You Eldar weave fate to your own ends, always for your selfish gain." "Perhaps," Millennial conceded with a nod. "But we cling to the thinnest thread of salvation. Even now our mutual enemies rise. Look above." The Imperials kept their unyielding gaze on the Elder. Celestine broke the silence. "I know that sight too well. That rift is an open wound. We must keep it from festering further." Greyfax scoffed. "Enough riddles. Why have you come here, Xenos?" Millennial met her challenge with cool resolve. "Because our wish to avert the end outweighs ancient grudges. This place is a crux in the web of fate. Here, with one strike, we can unleash an avalanche to quench the fires of chaos." Yvraine spoke solemnly. "The dark gods rise, and we must rise higher to bring them low. This," she gestured at the Triaris conveyor, "contains hope. Its master will be a beacon to your kind, one who will defy the ruinous powers and repel the encroaching shadow." The Vizarch stepped forward to stand beside Yvraine. "And he will not stand alone in that battle." Greyfax issued a harsh ultimatum. "You have earned yourselves an hour. Convince us or die." As the hours of negotiation wore on, an air of significance hung thickly. By the time Khazar Holn's sun dipped below the peaks of the Crone's Claw Mountains, humans and Eldar had reached an understanding closer than their races had ever known. After the Eldar made their case, the Imperial leaders conferred among themselves. Celestine insisted her visions had guided her to this very place, that the Eldar's intervention could not have been mere coincidence. Then she revealed their next destination, a place that resonated deeply with every soul present. The Archmagos nodded almost imperceptibly, affirming her words. If they were to reach their destination, they would need the Eldar's guidance through a labyrinthine realm known only to their kind. Celestine argued that if the Eldar wished them dead, they need only have stood by and watched as the Black Legion did their bloody work. Instead, they had intervened, risking themselves to save human lives. Greyfax urged caution at every step, insisting that while the mission was paramount, the Elder could always be dealt with afterward. Marshal Amalrich of the Black Templars, though still wary, eventually signalled for his battle brothers to sheathe their weapons, giving the grudging command for them to do the same, their hatred tempered, at least for now, by the greater threat looming ahead. The decision was sealed. The Imperials resolved to place their fate in the hands of the Eldar, for they had little alternative. Venturing unaccompanied into the boundless labyrinth of the webway was a peril few would survive. The Inari contingent assured them they would advance swiftly, keeping far ahead of the Chaos Space Marines tailing them, and protecting Archmagos Dominus's precious charge with every step. Thus the two forces merged into a single host, forging their way across the newly fallen snow towards the vast crystalline orb that marked the entrance to the fractal webway gate. Their path was lit from above by swirling warp storms that tore across the sky, threatening to spill the chaotic unreality of the warp into the structured cosmos. The Eldar were first to pass through, reuniting with their craft-world allies on the other side with solemn nods. When the Imperials stepped through, they found themselves awestruck, surrounded by the immense gathering of Eldar warriors, their numbers a staggering sight. As astonishing as the radiant webway was, it was only a glimpse of the grandeur yet to come, the gateway through which these unexpected allies would launch towards their ultimate goal. the ultramarine realm, and the world of Macragge, the last stronghold of hope